everybody, welcome back to another episode of Shifty's 49ers Talk. It's your boy Shifty coming at you with another one. Today we are talking about Jimmy Garoppolo, the surgery that he's going to be getting on his shoulder, and then if and how it will impact the 49ers offseason plans. Without further ado, let's get into it. It has been reported very recently that Jimmy Garoppolo will be undergoing off-season shoulder surgery. It's a shoulder that he injured against the Dallas Cowboys in the wild card game. Now, I do remember after that game, Kyle Shanahan mentioned that he did have a very slight injury, and of course we know that Garoppolo went on to play at Green Bay and at the Rams, so clearly it's nothing significant, although it is enough to warrant surgery. So how does this impact the 49ers going forward? Well, the timing of this is not great. You have the combine going on as we speak. You have all 32 general managers together, and this is typically the time where you can get these trades and they can get going real quick because you have all the general managers together. So his status now is a little bit up in the air, and I think ultimately, unfortunately, it does decrease his trade value somewhat because he's actually not going to be able to throw that much for the next few months after this surgery. Now, any new team acquiring Garoppolo would certainly like and maybe expect him, whoever he gets traded, to start working with those receivers on that team immediately. So that's not going to happen now. However, Jimmy Garoppolo is a veteran, he's a professional, he's been around the block, so I don't think it's like a rookie coming in who's going to miss some time. I think he'll be able to get up to speed with basically any team's playbook relatively quickly. However, a lot of other things kind of come into play now. So the new league year starts March 16th at 1 p.m. Pacific time, so less than 2 weeks from now. Currently, the 49ers are over the cap by about $4.5 million, and they need to get under it by March 16th. So I think in a perfect world, the Niners would have traded Garoppolo before then, and of course that could still happen, but it is just an interesting timing for Garoppolo's camp to decide now, although I can see it from their perspective where, of course, they would like to have Jimmy healed by the time like training camp and all that is ready to go for his new team, so he'll be able to perform. And of course, the new team would want that as well. So I think what the Niners are going to have to do probably is restructure Eric Armstead and maybe George Kittle too. By restructuring those guys, they would actually free up a bunch of money and they'll be well under the salary cap. It does push the money for those guys down the years a little bit, but both of those guys are still very productive and still relatively young. So I don't think that's a huge gamble to make. And then ultimately you can still trade Garoppolo. Now, let's just say if we don't really find any trade suitors, maybe teams are like, hey, with that shoulder, Jimmy's had notable injuries in the past, we're not trading for him. Ultimately, the 49ers can cut Garoppolo. So initially, you would think that they would get about $25.5 million by cutting him before June 1st. But therein comes some more issues where it gets a little bit more complicated because if I'm not mistaken, and if I've read things right about the contract, he would actually get a $7.5 million, essentially an injury settlement. Although, even getting more complicated is I'm not exactly sure if he would get paid that because this is a surgery that he is electing to get. So I don't know 100%, but let's just say for the sake of argument that he does get that $7.5 million injury settlement. Now that would initially count against the 49ers cap, but when he signs with a new team, let's just say if he signs for a new team for $7.5 million, then essentially that money would then get pushed to the new team and the 49ers wouldn't be on the hook for that. So, and I do think that he would garner probably significantly more than $7.5 million in free agency if we were to cut him as opposed to trade him. So I think that it's going to be somewhat of a game of chicken between the 49ers and all of these other teams. Now, you do have multiple teams who need quarterbacks. There's no doubt about that. And here's the thing. The quarterback market this offseason is not a good one. I talked about this recently in another video. You really don't have, I don't think Russell Wilson's going anywhere. Rodgers, I don't think is going anywhere. Brady's not coming out of retirement. It sounds like the Buccaneers will refuse to trade Brady unless they want 5 first-rounders, apparently, according to Bruce Arians. So it doesn't leave the teams looking for quarterbacks with a ton of options. In the draft, there's no bona fide one guy who's like a Trevor Lawrence or a Joe Burrow or an Andrew Luck. None of those guys exist in this year's draft. just today it's been reported that Kenny Pickett, although he is still probably my number one quarterback in the draft, pretty small hands. I'm actually going to, after this video, I'm going to measure my hands and compare him to Kenny Pickett's hand size just to see, just for reference and for kind of fun. But his hand size is very small. He did have a lot of fumbling issues at Pitt. So does that impact his draft status and his draft value? So you never know. So his value potentially lowering also does help the fact that, there's not many guys. The two main guys really out there are going to be Carson Wentz, who's likely to be cut by Indianapolis, and then Jimmy Garoppolo, who's likely to be cut by the 49ers or traded. So you do have other guys like Mitch Trubisky and you have Marcus Mariota and stuff, but to me, none of those guys really inspire much confidence. None of those guys have really done much in the league, let's be real. So I think that really puts Wentz and Garoppolo as the top two available quarterbacks. So I don't know how much this is really going to impact. I think the 49ers, look, obviously we want to trade him, so we'll get something in return and we can help build a team with that. But if we have to cut him, then so be it. The biggest thing here is the cap issues. And honestly, I think if we don't get a deal done in place to trade Garoppolo soon, I think we might just end up having to cut him. Because look, free agency is right around the corner and we have a lot of guys we need to bring back. I mean, for me, most notably is DJ Jones and Laken Tomlinson. To me, we got to bring both of those guys back. Then you have players like Jaquiski Tartt, you have Raheem Mostert. There was talk today about John Lynch saying Jason Verrett could be back. I would like Verrett back, but on a very, very cheap one-year deal. So in the grand scheme of things, I don't actually think this surgery is going to impact what we're going to... I mean, I think regardless, Garoppolo will be gone. I think it's a little bit of a bummer, though, because no doubt it decreases his trade value. So, unfortunately, I was kind of thinking we could maybe get a second-round pick, and maybe we will, because a lot of times quarterbacks go for a lot more than we expect. I mean, if you look at Sam Darnold, he went for, like a second-round pick and maybe a fourth or something. So, if you can get that much for Sam Darnold, then you'd have to think that Jimmy Garoppolo should go for that. But, of course, Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't have the age on his side, and he does have significant injury history. So yeah, it's a really long, kind of complicated process. There's a lot of different financials involved, but at the end of the day, for the 49ers, number one, Garoppolo, I think there's basically zero chance he'll be on the 49ers come 2022. I think we will have to get rid of him. Whether that's a trade or we just cut him, that remains to be seen. I still think that there is a market for Garoppolo to be traded, but I think that's definitely bumped down to maybe a third-round pick, which at this point, I would probably take it and run with that if I was the 49ers. So, but then again, you never know how it's going to play out, because John Lynch mentioned that there's a possibility of Garoppolo coming back. I just think that's him. That's smokescreen stuff. I just think that's him playing mind games, or just playing the game, as you will, as a general manager, to maybe help bump up Jimmy's value a little bit. But I have no doubt in my mind that Garoppolo will be playing for another team. As I've been saying, I think the most likely destinations for him are going to be either Denver or Pittsburgh or maybe Washington now. I think those are the top three places I could see Jimmy going to. But for me, honestly, I am just ready to, at this point, move on and move full head on into the Trey Lance era. It's going to be really exciting, and I do wish Jimmy Garoppolo the best of luck. I mean, I'm a huge Jimmy Garoppolo fan, and he's brought a lot of success to the Niners in terms of getting to a Super Bowl, NFC Championship game, and it's his impact on the franchise has been very positive. But with the way things have kind of worked out, I think it's time to move on to Trey Lance. So those are my thoughts there, guys, on the Jimmy Garoppolo situation, the surgery that he's going to be getting, what it may mean for our offseason plans, and let me know what you guys think about Jimmy Garoppolo, the timing of this surgery, what his trade value might be, where he might get traded to. And at this point, guys, I'm going to leave it there. But there's two things that I'm always going to say, is that the butt counts, and I'm going to catch y'all on the flip side.